Good morning, English 345 students. Sorry I couldn't be with you this morning, but as I promised in the email I sent you earlier this morning, I'll go over the last few items that you would need to know about for Quiz 4. So the last topic that we needed to talk about was constituents. And constituents are pretty similar to phrases. It's like another way that linguists use some kind of evidence to show that words go together in our mental grammar. So we've been doing a lot of practicing with tree diagrams. We looked at 3 different types of sentences. It's simple sentences, compound sentences, and finally the complementizer sentences. So you're familiar with 3 different kinds of sentences and how to diagram those into trees. So the other linguistic evidence that I just mentioned that supports phrasal structure in our mental grammar would be constituents. And it's basically another term for a group of words that act together to form a unit. So how do we know that these actually exist in our mind? We can do different kinds of tests with sentences and groups of words to be able to kind of show proof for this. So the first one is called a replacement test. So if you look at a sentence like, the students saw their friends after class, you can probably guess which words kind of go together in that sentence. Even if you were to diagram it into a tree, you could probably make some pretty good guesses. And then maybe after class, or their friends, or the students, or even saw. You would kind of be able to figure out where the dividing lines go in that sentence. But if I were to take out their friends, I could easily replace that with something else, right? So the students saw somebody after class, or the students saw them after the class, or the students saw a bunch of crazy people after class. We could replace it with any other noun phrase. So noun phrases we can definitely replace in a sentence. So I could replace it with other pronouns like it, or them, or they, or other noun phrases like the example I just gave. Or the students saw somebody, or the students, in this case it would be the verb that we're looking at, so I can replace this with a different verb, right? I could even replace it with the form of the verb do. So the students do their friends after class. It's grammatical, it sounds a little strange to say that, but you could say it. It would be grammatical. But there are probably lots of other verbs that I could use in place there, and would have a more natural meaning. So the students went to their house, or went to the movies with their friends after class. So we could replace that with other verbs. Okay, the students saw their friends. We could replace this with a different prepositional phrase, or maybe with a different word. So instead of saying saw their friends after class, we could say the students saw their friends then, or the students saw their friends there. So there are a few different possibilities there too, or a different prepositional phrase. The students saw their friends inside the movie theater. And finally, we could replace another noun phrase at the beginning of the sentence. Instead of saying the students saw their friends after class, we could say they saw their friends after class, or the girls saw their friends after class. But if we wanted to replace, let's say we took the words students saw their out of the sentence, there's really nothing that we can replace that with. We can't say the students' friends after class, or they, them, friends after class. It wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't work. So we can see easily that certain words or certain groups of words in a sentence are not going to be a constituent because you couldn't replace them with anything. So the last sentence would be an example of that. And finally, you could even replace adjectives within a sentence. In this example sentence, we don't happen to have any adjectives, actually. If we did have the happy students saw their friends after class, we could replace happy with any other adjective. The smart students saw their friends after class. So we can definitely replace lots of different phrases with pronouns or with other similar phrases, and that's called the replacement test. The other test that we'll look at is called the movement test, and we saw this with adverbs in some other sentences a little bit earlier in the course, that you can take adverbs and kind of move them around in a sentence, and it doesn't really change the meaning of the sentence too much. But we can do this with constituents, and it doesn't change meaning, doesn't change the grammaticality of the sentence, and we can do this very easily with prepositional phrases. They're pretty movable in sentences. So if we look at the sentence that comes directly from Chapter 8 of Essentials of Linguistics, the Anderson text, Nimra bought a top from that strange little shop. Can you spot the prepositional phrase in that sentence? And it would be this part right here, from that strange little shop. Okay, so I can easily move that to the beginning of my sentence. From that strange little shop, Nimra bought a top. It sounds a little more unnatural, I guess, than the original sentence, but it is possible and the meaning is still clear. If you really wanted to emphasize the strange little shop in your sentence, you'd want to move it to the beginning of the sentence. Okay, if I decided to move a different group of words, like from that strange, Nimra bought a top little shop. It doesn't make any more sense. The sentence doesn't work. So you can see that certain groups of words have to move together, and that kind of shows what you've been practicing with the tree diagrams. If you don't group the right sets of words together, the tree doesn't really work. The sentence doesn't work. So in this case, from that strange little shop is the prepositional phrase that has to stay together. Okay, another kind of idea we can explore here too is recursion. So as we just saw, we can move prepositional phrases around quite a lot, and they also happen to be very repeatable. So recursion we can define as the ability of a finite set of rules to produce an infinite number of sentences. And this goes along with what we talked about a couple of classes ago about generative grammar, what Noam Chomsky came up with in the 1950s, that we have this finite set of rules in our brains, but they produce an infinite number of ideas and sentences. And that allows us to kind of, it's almost like our brain is a computer program or an algorithm that just keeps producing new ideas. So noun phrases and prepositional phrases can generate each other. So I could say something like, the girl with the kitten in a cage on the roof of an apartment building in Chicago with a friend beside the lake next to Soldier Field near the Willis Tower. So can you see all the prepositional phrases with noun phrases embedded in there? So the girl with a kitten in a cage on the roof of an apartment building, etc. So you can see all those prepositional phrases. With begins a prepositional phrase, in begins one, on begins one, of, in, with, beside, next, near. And within all of those prepositional phrases, you have noun phrases. The roof, an apartment building, Chicago, a friend, the lake, Soldier Field, the Willis Tower. So all of those phrases could keep on going and going and going for infinity. You probably wouldn't do that for practical reasons, but it's possible. It could go on forever. And we can even do this with conjunctions like the word that we see in the complementizer sentences. So I could say, I bought a car that needed new tires, that had too many miles on it, that cost too much, and that was not worth the money I paid for it. So I could add lots and lots and lots of new parts to my sentence just by using the conjunction that. So this kind of self-generating sentence is called a recursive sentence. And another kind of test that we'll take a look at here is called the cleft test. So a cleft is just a kind of sentence that has this form. It was blank that. And we usually use these kind of sentences if you want to emphasize a certain piece of information in that sentence. So you can basically take a sentence such as the one we see here, Nimra bought a top from that strange little shop, and you can reword the sentence to emphasize the strange little shop, kind of like we did with the movement test. So you could say instead, it was from that strange little shop that Nimra bought a top. And we can see that it's very easy to take that prepositional phrase, insert it after it was, and be able to continue the rest of the sentence in a grammatical way. If I took a different group of words, it wouldn't make grammatical sense. We'll see that in the next few examples here. Okay, so with a sentence like, the students saw their friends after class. So I can definitely take the students and I can move that to form a cleft sentence. So it was the students who saw their friends after class. And in this case, I'm using who instead of that because I'm referring to people, the students. I can take a prepositional phrase like after class, and I can move that after the cleft part of the sentence. It was after class that the students saw their friends. Or their friends. It was their friends that the students saw after class. So I can take these different constituents of the sentence, move any of them after it was, and I can still continue the rest of the sentence in a grammatical way. However, if I look at another example sentence like Ria's sister baked these delicious cookies, if I choose other groups of words that don't work as constituents, the sentences don't make any sense. So if I take, for example, instead of Ria's sister or baked or these delicious cookies, if I take other words that don't go together naturally, it doesn't work out. So it was sister baked that Ria's these delicious cookies, it doesn't work. Or it was these delicious that Ria's sister baked cookies. The sentence isn't grammatical. The syntax doesn't make sense. Or it was cookies that Ria's sister baked these delicious. So we need to keep certain groups of words together for the sentence to make sense, for the constituents to appear there. Okay, and finally, the last of the tests that we'll look at is answers to questions. So if a string of words is a constituent, it's usually grammatical for it to stand alone as the answer to a question based on that sentence. So if I have a sentence like the alligators gobbled up the golden sausages, so I can ask questions that will point to different constituents in that sentence. So what did the alligators gobble up? And you can probably answer that question very easily, right? Golden sausages. So we know that that points to a noun phrase at the end of the sentence, which happens to be embedded within the prepositional phrase. No, in fact, it's the object of the verb, gobbled up. I was thinking up was a preposition for a second there, but it's actually a particle attached to the verb gobbled. Okay, who or what gobbled up the golden sausages? That should also be very easy to answer. So in this case, the alligators. And I can even insert optionally the verb did there as a replacement for the verb gobbled up. Gobbled up it's kind of like its own constituent there too. So the alligators did, or the alligators gobbled up the golden sausages. So what does did replace? As I just mentioned, it would be the verb gobbled up. And if I try to ask sort of a question that yields a different kind of answer, like what did the alligators gobble up sausages? If I'm not, asking a question that points to the right thing in the sentence, and in this case, I've added the word sausages, which kind of almost refers back to what says in that sentence. It's like hard to figure out. You have to be able to ask a question that points to a specific phrase or specific constituent in that sentence. So this is a test that, it works for, asking for who did something, what something was, and maybe an object of a verb, what the subject of a sentence is, something like that. Okay, so those are basically all the constituents that you need to know about before you attempt quiz 4. And we'll come out of our presentation here. I have uploaded this, the current form of it, within the Module 4 folder. And once you head back into Blackboard, you'll see in the Module 4 folder that Quiz 4 is now available. And you're welcome to take it anytime during the window of time that I've set there, from Wednesday, March 11th at 11, all the way to 9 a.m. on Friday, March 13th. And just like the other tests, the other quizzes, once you start it, you need to complete it in one sitting, and you'll have 2 hours to complete the quiz. So let me know if you run into any difficulties, any questions, some technical problems as you take the quiz, and hopefully I will see you all on Friday in better shape. Have a great day and see you soon.